that was the last time I would get to see my 5th graders in person, and not knowing that was really super difficult.
It was snowing, it was in March, and I'm like, what?
I was pretty sad because I really liked my teacher, Mrs. Wilson.
At first I thought it was just like a giant vacation. They started talking about how we might not even have school later in the fall, and I'm like, wait, what?
Sending kids home was pretty abrupt. We probably had 24 to 48 hours of planning time before we said, okay, everyone is gonna stay home.
I can recall twice in my career where I had that same feeling. And the first time was right after 9/11. I remember sitting with my 5th graders back then knowing that something really big has happened, but just not knowing the enormity of it and that things were going to be different. So that morning of March 13th, I remember sitting with my class at Community Circle, knowing I had that same feeling. I couldn't describe what it was, but knowing that something big was happening and it was going to affect us in ways that we didn't know, and that we didn't know how long it was going to last.
On a Wednesday night, we were having a board meeting. It was celebratory in nature. We were approving all sorts of new investments with Student Success Act dollars. And the next morning, it felt like everything had changed. The realization that we were in the throes of a global pandemic, and we immediately had to figure out how to send students and staff home. And we thought it was going to be for a couple of weeks. I remember this overwhelming sense of uncertainty, and knowing that we were all going to be facing challenges that we had never imagined possible.
We have no people contact. We didn't have kid contact. We were just in there doing our jobs.
The statement that there was a new normal isn't true. There was no new normal.
And we probably adjusted our plan 4 or 5 times in quick succession, when usually you do it one time for a year, maybe one time every few years.
I kind of stayed at home and I kind of quarantined myself. It was really hard. I was thinking, oh man, I don't get to finish 2nd grade. I have to finish it virtually, which really sucks.
Technology and Zoom. I'm like, Zoom, isn't that like a kid show we used to watch? I have to do what?
I didn't know what asynchronous was and synchronous, so I learned 2 new words. Yeah.
I'm 10. I don't know a lot about technology.
It was really disappointing because I love in-person school, and I just don't being online.
Technology became the center of everything that we would ultimately be doing. First of all, we had to figure out how to get about 2,400 devices out to our youngest elementary students. We also had to think about how we would collaborate. And so what would that look like for staff meetings? What would it look like when teams of administrators would work together to create the newest plan based on the newest guidance that we were given?
Sometimes the teacher would have to do something like a link, and the link wouldn't work. I wouldn't be able to hear anything that people were saying, and sometimes the screens would freeze. I knew how to unmute myself, how to mute myself, how to turn off my camera, how to turn on my camera.
My sound and my internet would go off, and it was hard to hear my teacher.
You had to learn a lot of discipline to get it done because there was no one around you to tell you to get it done.
It was hard to interact with people in the breakout rooms because either they would maybe be somewhere else and they would have their video off.
I felt really silly asking all of those kindergarten questions into a camera, not getting any responses back.
I felt like sometimes I was teaching to a blank screen, so you didn't get that, the body language you get from the kids, the nods, you couldn't see what they were doing.
Didn't know what most of my students looked like until I got back in the building with them. The fact that I couldn't be reading with a kid and look out and see what everyone else was doing was hard.
For me, it was lonely. This has been hard doing band, because band is a corporate activity. I mean, we band together. That's the meaning of the word.
Throughout the entire time, there was a backdrop of loss. Loss of jobs, which meant loss of income, loss of homes, and certainly loss of life. It was never lost on me how hard this was going to be for our community, for the families within our community, for our staff, for our students. There are community members who didn't have the luxury or the ability to be able to work from home.
That home to work-life balance was a big piece for me, having 3 little girls at home, and especially when working from home, those lines were often blurred.
In my career, I have traditionally been able to leave school at school and then be a mom and a wife when I'm at home. And that was really challenging for me. I was, working and looking at emails and doing things at all hours.
We found ourselves doing more in-home activities like baking and cooking, and I kind of appreciate getting to know my family a little bit more.
When I figured out I had to be home a lot, it actually made me a little happy because I could see my brother more often than I would.
Fall 2020 was always supposed to be this amazing, glorious finish line in our district. Our voters in our community passed a very large capital improvement bond in 2016. Fall of 2020 is when the construction projects, the new high school and the transformation schools would be completed. It was always intended to be this glorious approach to the finish line where we could celebrate with our community and have grand openings and tours, and COVID upended all of that.
We were remodeling 3 schools and building the new high school and trying to get all of our schools packed up and moved while the majority of our staff worked from home.
So I had about half of my teachers that needed to relocate to the other side of the building. We brought in all of our staff and they packed at the end of the year. They were in their classrooms boxing up things.
I didn't even know where to start when you pack up 20 years of your life.
There was close to 1,000, well, over 1,000 books that ended up needing to be weeded, and so it was a feat.
I think for so many of us, it was incredibly frustrating. The transformation schools were complete and the new high school was ready to go, and our vision was always a grand opening with the entire community invited. It was just a huge disappointment.
I remember it looked like you were looking through a phone filter where we were. It all just looked pretty yellow.
And you could barely see like 7 feet in front of you.
Our power actually was cut in the middle of the night. My neighbor knocked on our door and said, hey, there's a fire up on the hillside.
Thinking like, oh my gosh, this is getting close.
It was just chaos and turmoil, and yet we still persevered. The show must go on.
Not only were people fearful, but it also became like one more thing. How would we deliver textbooks and supplies and devices and have those pickup events? Now all of a sudden, what we've gotten really good at doing outside, we can't do outside because smoke is filling the air. And we can't have families in that, staff in that. There was one afternoon where district office team members racing to the high school to help with distribution of textbooks before the first day of school. Staff all across the district just stepped up in amazing ways. The teamwork, the selflessness, the kindness, and the caring was just exactly what Sherwood School District staff are all about. I'm so proud to be a part of this team.
We needed to get electronic devices into kids' hands because they had to cancel the pickups at the schools because of the smoke. And so we got the bus drivers N95 masks, and they went out and they delivered devices on that Friday and Saturday before school was scheduled to start.
I was out there to meet new students and families, and I was out there all day and didn't even realize how bad the air quality was until I took off my mask and it was literally black.
Over the years, our district has spent a great deal of time and thought and energy on how to create learning communities and learning environments that are welcoming and safe for all of our students and their families. The historical and continued events of this past year has certainly brought additional light on the national social justice movement that impacts all of us. Hearing the brave stories from our students and their families and staff members has really furthered my understanding around why inclusion and creating opportunities for all of our students is so important and such an important piece of what we should be doing in the Sherwood School District.
It's important to learn about differences in our society, and I think a lot of the protests brought out that we definitely have an imbalance in the country.
There was a lot of student interest in particular in having tough conversations.
My students have been really willing to engage hard questions, careful about how they do it. I'm also often proud of their sensitivity to each other.
Having a black son in our school district, we got to see firsthand how he was treated and some of the things that impacted him. I don't assume that I know a student's story based on who they are, what they look like, what they bring to the classroom. And I think that whole social justice movement brought that to my attention.
It really opened my eyes. It really opened my heart to understanding really where some of these kiddos are coming from.
It made me question myself. Am I doing some of these things that are currently not okay? In the last year, there are things that I have adjusted for myself in my home life, in my normal day-to-day, how I interact with people.
As teachers, we are one of those safe spots that any child should feel like they can come to and belong, as well as their families.
With everything that's going on, it just kind of opened our minds to being more accepted.
I think change is a very good thing, and if you can't listen to change, then I don't know how change is going to change you.
It's easy for me to name my favorite day of the entire last year, and that was the day that we returned children to school, that first day.
Seeing the kids running around and being present, that's what creates our job.
It was quite overwhelming. I soon got so used to being online, I wasn't used to going back into the classroom and having people together. It's
It makes you feel part of a community.
I really like going to a real school in real life.
It was kind of weird though, because everyone was super tall, because I thought they were going to be shorter because we only saw their faces in Zoom.
For kindergartners, I feel like it was difficult for them to recognize each other. They were wearing their mask, and they know each other's names, so after, saying like, oh, that's so-and-so from Zoom, do you remember them? Then they think about it and be like, oh yeah, I remember that name. That's who you are? Oh, okay.
I was also sad that we couldn't go back to Hopkins because that was a really nice school. But when I went to my classroom, it was bigger and it had more things, so now I feel like having a bigger classroom is better.
The good thing was that we had like a tour on the first day, so we learned everywhere to go.
The best moment was that hour on a Friday morning when the internet was gone. And we were 8, 9, 10 people in a room discussing the book that we had read. And nothing to do with technology. It was all human beings and paper and ideas and words. It was marvelous.
We hadn't seen joy, we hadn't seen the excitement, we hadn't seen that glow or that sparkle in our kids, and, until we were able to have some normalcy in having a senior prom and dancing and smiles and hugs and graduation and the culmination of, oh my goodness, not only did we graduate, but we really lived through this.
I really loved the valedictorian speaker, David Ma. He had a beautiful speech about persevering through change and being better because of the pandemic.
Take the knowledge that we conquered the most challenging senior year in recent history and the resilience that has come with it. Because there is no adversity that we, the class of 2021, in the present or the future, cannot overcome.
I think the 2020 seniors had just a real hard time ending their senior year in the way that it ended. I think the 2021 seniors had an even more difficult road because I think they all thought, well, we'll have a senior year, and then that became truncated in ways that we didn't anticipate. But for those seniors that graduated this year, they get the memory of being the first across the stage in a new stadium, the first to have their prom at the new high school.
Very, very happy, ecstatic that, we actually get the chance to walk across that stage and get our diplomas and have our parents be in the crowd. The people that supported us along all those years, especially this year.
I really believe that the pandemic has created some really challenging conditions that have forced all of us to reevaluate our priorities and also learn to appreciate maybe some of the things that we had taken for granted.
I figured out how to balance my time. I started reading books again. I started jogging again. I haven't done that since college.
I've been learning so much at writing. My mommy set up a computer for me, and now I'm writing my own stories.
Our kids are amazing and resilient. Oftentimes I think that we should look to them because they're just so open and honest.
We're gonna go into next year and the kids are gonna be ready. They're gonna be excited. We experience, what it could look like, and it could be even better.
I'm kind of hoping for next year that maybe we can do a little self-care as a staff. We're two separate staffs coming together, so I'm hoping for a little bit of team building and a chance to get to know my colleagues and share our stories with each other.
It's up to us to make sure that our schools are ready and welcoming, and whatever that plan's going to look like and however we're best going to support kids, they're still reliant on those relationships and that learning.
If we help support them as we return to normal, that will give them a set of skills that will be unique for their generation as they grow into adulthood and hopefully make the world a better place.
My greatest hopes for the coming year are twofold. That we will see students every day at every grade level laughing, learning, making relationships with friends and with the educators in their buildings. And the hope that regardless of our differences, that we can treat each other with kindness and with respect and extend grace to one another when that's also needed.